Hello, everybody, and welcome to Respawning Fire, the kick-ass, irreverent gaming podcast from Affable Idiots. I'm one of your hosts, Alexander Kazina, aka Cozy Bear, and this is our backlog accomplishment with Respawn and Friends review, also known as our BARF review for Castlevania Lords of Shadow. As we all know on this podcast, your boy Cozy is prone to do all manner of hilarious pranks and guffaws at the beginning of the show, but it seems like Adam has decided to get in on the bits as well. I don't know what Adam is planning on doing. You know, this would be a really good time for him to finally reveal himself instead of us just awkwardly hanging around here.
Introduce the
all right,
host.
you know what?
I think it'll be worth it, you guys.
I'm going to make a point of introducing all our other guests first before we bring you on. Guest number one, I have a bit of a cold today. It's weird because I've had this cold all weekend. It was worse on
Are you introducing
Friday.
yourself?
Saturday got a little... No, I'm not introducing myself. I'm introducing my cold. It was bad on Friday. Got a little bit better on Saturday. It was great on Sunday when we did our podcast together. But now it's transitioned into the state where I feel pretty good, but I'm a little bit phlegmy. And so if I have to take a moment to grab some water, if I have to cough a little bit, please excuse me. I'll try to do my best to keep the show nice and tight and not too coffee. Joining me as well this evening is, of course, the host with the most, Chad Michael Innes.
Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. That's PEMDAS. Parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction is what that stands for. PEMDAS.
And joining us as well, a returning guest to Respawning Fire and a returning BARF guest as well. It is, of course, the one and only Brian, open parentheses, Time to Die Network, close parentheses. How's it going?
Every good boy does fine. That's a little piano tactic to remember your sharps.
And of course, we're joined by another amazing guest host this evening. Everybody demanded it on the previous podcast that we did, and so I am incredibly proud to announce the introduction of Mimi the Kiwi, who will be joining us in addition to Gugu the Goose, who's here as well.
Oh my God.
But Gugu the Goose is not a special guest because he's appeared on this podcast too many times. Only Mimi the Kiwi will be considered such. Not really liking Mimi the Kiwi's placement right now. I gotta be honest, pretty rude of Mimi to be directly in front of my mouth, so I'm gonna lower Mimi the Kiwi out of view for the time being. Oh man, I'd love to eat a kiwi. Let me tell you guys, can we just take a moment, like a half hour or so, to talk about all the birds that we would eat if given the chance? That
normally I would say yes, but you have 170 pages of notes.
I have 13 pages of notes.
Kiwi
in 11
bird and kiwi
font.
Fruit, are they related, or is one
is
of
definitely
them
named after the
wannabe?
other? That's one of those things where you would think that they're just weirdly unrelated,
Hold,
but in
please.
fact, one of them is named after the other.
And
Yes.
does
Medium.com.
the bird have
Which came first, the
juicy
kiwi,
green
the kiwi,
inside?
or the kiwi? There's a third kiwi.
Oh shit!
It's Australian people.
Oh, like as in
sorry, New
in
Zealand.
slang
New
for
Zealand.
somebody from
Wait.
New Zealand.
Yeah. The proto
That's
kiwi
probably
first arrived in
racist.
New Zealand perhaps as long as 50 million years ago, long before Homo sapiens were even a twinkle in a proto primate's eye. It's wild.
Wow. And yeah, that's it. And no other guests on this podcast. If there were any guests that were previously supposed to be on this podcast, they magically disappeared into a puff of smoke, like the Lord Dracula himself.
It's me, Dracula. I'm here to talk about this game.
And that is a pathetic
I'm
effect.
Griffin Macro. I think Dracula.
That is, man,
Very good.
that is awful.
That was worth it.
Was it? All right.
I love.
At
Did
the
y'all
top
just
of
see
this
my
month-
dog come out here and wipe his ass on the carpet as soon as you introduce that?
No, I was too focused on how bad that effect was. All right, guys. At the top of this month, because it was my birthday, I put out a poll with you guys in tow and ask you, our humble viewers, to vote on a poll that we lovingly called Oops, all PS3 360 action games. The choices between Lollipop Chainsaw, Dante's Inferno, Asura's Wrath, and Castlevania: Lords of Shadow. And you voted on Lords of Shadow. And oh boy, do I have a lot to say about this game. One could say I have 13 pages of notes in 11-point font to say about this game. And I want to say this up front. At any point, if you guys have anything that you want to contribute, anything that you want to say, just straightforwardly interrupt me. I will get back on track, but don't hesitate to interrupt me if you have anything to say, because I will talk your ears off.
One quick interruption. Yes. I'm sorry. Keep going. I just got to run to the bathroom real quick.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's been interruption number 1. Much appreciated. I do also want to give myself a moment to clear my throat every now and then, give my larynx a little bit of a rest. So, I appreciate the interruptions.
I had a friend who used to say larynx. Like they used to pronounce it larynx. Like they would rearrange the letters on accident. I think it's a disorder called dyslexia. But instead of just reading it wrong, they would say it wrong too.
So here's the thing. I have a lot of notes on the development of Castlevania Lords of Shadow. But before we get to that, I think that it's important, like with a lot of things, that we put this game in context. This game released in North America on October 5th, 2010. And it came at a time when a lot of Japanese video game developers were, getting very bullish about handing over their beloved properties to Western studios. Capcom was sort of like the main studio that was leading the way in that regard, because you had Dead Rising 2, which was given to Capcom Vancouver. You had Lost Planet 3, which was given to Spark Unlimited. You had their Bionic Commando reboot. I don't know if you remember that one. That was given to a studio called Grin. And of course, you had DMC.
And I watch porn. Jim Crep's cold and I watch porn.
I mean,
Gonna do it right now.
Here's what I'll say. That is a more impressive costume than Adam's costume. Adam's was just abysmal. This is impressive, but also I don't feel like it's simultaneously, it's even less of a vampire costume than Adam's was. And Adam's was not good. But I will give you a few points for that.
Sorry, did I interrupt? I was just trying to watch some porn.
Yeah, we were talking about the... you ever played the 2009 Bionic Commando reboot from Grin? It was the game where the guy had like a dead wife, like in a lot of these games, but the dead wife was turned into his bionic hand. It was really weird.
No, I only own one game on Xbox 360. It's called Castlevania Lords of Shadow. You ever heard of it?
Yeah, we have. All right. So,
what is
you
this
had all these games
supposed to be?
Oh, Garrick, I'm Mickey B. I used to know Hobo Brian down when he used to live under the bridge, but ever since he became a part of society, I sneak in here sometimes when he's away to look at porn. You guys enjoy Mountain Dew much?
A little bit.
Great. What flavor of Mountain Dew do you enjoy?
I like to make my own little concoction here. I got regular old Mountain Dew. Let me ask you fellas, you ever tried something called Mountain Dew?
Oh, sounds good.
Very good.
You know what, that makes sense, because Mountain Dew's name is a reference to moonshine. That actually makes a lot of sense.
What are you, some kind of fucking nerd?
I mean, you're the one that's drinking Mountain Dew out of a really nice looking glass. I feel like most people don't even bother with that.
Oh yeah, it's Hobo Brian's glass. Or sorry, just regular Brian's glass. I keep calling him Hobo. I used to know him that way,
Man.
You guys ever play Castlevania Lords of Shadow? It's the only game I use the rest of the Xbox 360 to watch my porn DVDs.
We're talking about it right now, bud.
Perfect timing.
Holy shit.
I've never tried putting a porn DVD into my Xbox or PlayStation. I feel like that would brick the console if you tried doing that.
Well, it did, but I have a buddy who knows how to jailbreak it.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about Konami. Konami, not a studio that was immune to a lot of this during this generation. There were a lot of Silent Hill games during this time that they handed over to Western studios as well. Pretty much like every Silent Hill game post Silent Hill 4 was that case. And so that's sort of the circumstances in which this game comes out. And what made this whole scenario also interesting is that this game came after kind of a historic run of the Castlevania series on the GBA and DS. For context, the last mainline Castlevania game that came out before this one was Order of Ecclesia, which is the last like Metroidvania style Castlevania game that came out on the DS. And so there was this real kind of mix of emotions where people were like, oh man, series is critically beloved. We're putting out all these fantastic 2D Metroidvania style Castlevania games, but series wasn't really going super well. I read a lot of like interviews. I read a lot of like pieces on the history of this game leading up to this podcast. And a frequent name that comes up in a lot of them is this guy, Dave Cox. Nice. Spelled COX. And think about Dave Cox. He fucks.
Oh, what a shitty life.
Basically, he was sort of like the mouthpiece for this game, and he basically did an interview with Edge Online where he was like, yeah, Castlevania series wasn't going anywhere, sales were dwindling, and it was, it was only appealing to a very small, hardcore base of fans, and that's how franchises die. So they were on a mission to try and reinvent this series. And yeah, it was just this weird situation where it was kind of a lot like the Metroid series at the time, where the Metroid games, also very beloved, very iconic, but like not a series that had really kind of brought in the dough sales-wise. However, the other thing is, unlike Metroid, which had managed to find success in the 3D realm with the Prime games, Castlevania had never really managed to do the same thing. There had been the Castlevania games on the Nintendo 64, which... the less said about those, the better. And there had also been 2 Castlevania games on the PS2 that were 3D games. There was Lament of Innocence and Curse of Darkness. I don't know if anybody here on this panel ever played either of those 2.
No.
The nerdiest fucking guy I ever met, I tell you what.
What I've read online from a lot of other nerds is that those games aren't that bad, but they just didn't really live up to, the incredible promise of the Castlevania series. And so, yeah, this game gets announced. And I remember in the lead up to its release, the reaction to it being a little bit mixed, where a lot of the previews for it were pretty glowing. There were a lot of people within the video game press that were like, this game seems pretty cool. But there were a lot of people who were like, oh man, it kind of sucks that Konami feels like the only way they can reinvent the series, the only way they can keep it relevant and popular, is by turning it into basically a God of War clone at a time where there were a lot of God of War style games, like Dante's Inferno running around. And so there's all this drama going up to the game's release, and it ends up getting a pretty warm reception. It's not a game that's universally beloved at the time, but the PS3 and 360 versions of the game are currently sitting at 85 and 83 on Metacritic, respectively. For context, Order of Ecclesia, which is the last DS Castlevania game, sitting at an 85 itself. So there was this sort of general sentiment of, there's no denying it rips off God of War, but it's pretty good for what it is. And that reception is not super surprising if you knew about this game's development. Now, before I talk about this game's development, Adam.
Yeah, what's up?
When you booted up this game,
Mm-hmm.
how much of a jump scare was it when you saw the Kojima Productions logo?
Oh, I wasn't too worried because I knew it was normal Kojima fare where he just puts his name on it but doesn't actually do any work. So it didn't worry me too much.
So yeah, this game was an interesting example of a kind of collaborative process between Mercury Steam, which is his studio based in Madrid, Spain, and Kojima Productions. Mercury Steam, founded in 2002 by former members of another studio called Rebel Axe Studios, which previously developed a game called Severance, Blade of Darkness. Any nerds here play that game? Nope. After their founding, they made American McGee Presents Scrapland in 2004. Any nerds here played it?
I've played the Alice 1, American Music,
Yeah.
Alice, whatever. Yeah.
I feel like that's the game most people played. And they also co-developed Clive Barker's Jericho in 2007.
I do know that one.
You do know that one. I don't think anybody
I know
here's
that
played
show.
it, though. Same with me.
I didn't watch the show, but I knew it was a show.
You guys ever play a game called Leisure Suit Larry?
Magna Cum Laude is my favorite one.
Anyways, so yeah, somehow through making all these games that not a lot of people play, they got themselves on Konami's radar. And so yeah, what was happening is around this time, 2007, 2008, there apparently were like a lot of different competing prototypes going forward for what would be the next big thing in the Castlevania series. I'm reading here, there was a interview that Cox did with IGN back in 2010, and he was like, yeah, apparently like Japan was going to pitch their own thing, America was going to pitch their own thing, and you guys over in Madrid are going to pitch your own thing as well. Originally, the game began as like a classic kind of 8-bit reimagining of the first game, but in 3D. And then from there, it underwent like a lot of evolution and a little bit of turmoil. They like initially thought, well, maybe we can make it more of its own original thing. And then it came very close to being canceled. They showed off a successful prototype, and the higher ups at Konami were like, okay, you can keep it going. And then the moment where the game really got some gas is they basically had a big, oh, don't you worry. It's extra special gas because it's Konami branded gas. Basically, they showed it off at like a big boardroom meeting at Konami's corporate offices that Kojima sat in on. And Kojima was like, yo, these games got the gas. And he, from then on, basically became very involved in the development of it. Hold on, I'm going to grab some water.
Cozy is doing God's work. What's up, Mickey?
I was peeping on Brian last night with his buddy. They were playing this game and they were eating jalapeno chips. I'll tell you what, they probably had the gas. I think that's why he's in the bathroom for right now. That's why I knew it was a good time to watch some porn.
Yeah, I have this quote here. At what Kojima endorsed it, which certainly opened a lot of doors for us, Cox said. He came to us and said, let me know what I can do to help you get this moving. And from then on, Kojima basically, played this sort of producerial role on the game. He wasn't super hands-on. He didn't like contribute to the game's writing, for example, but he offered up a lot of his tips of an experience. The people, the folks under his watch at Kojima Productions lent their expertise as well. One big way in which he contributed to the project, for example, was he kind of helped them refine the design of Gabriel Belmont in the game. Originally, apparently, Gabriel Belmont was sort of more of like this barbaric character, and he's like, no, you should have this game headlined by someone who has a little bit more of a refined air to him. He should be someone who's more of like a kind of real person, someone who's much more of an everyman as opposed to this one-dimensional kind of action hero archetype. And he also lent his, contributions in things like, for example, doing a lot of mocap and facial capture, which you'd have to imagine by that point the people over at Kojima Productions had down on lock. And, Konami, to their benefit, injected a lot of their own money as well, hiring talent like Robert Carlyle, Patrick Stewart, and Natasha McElhone to the project as well. I hope I pronounced her last name correctly, by the way. I have not actually said that out loud
Just
until this exact moment. Yeah, just got to keep pushing.
I will say, it was such a fun thing to have Patrick Stewart pop up and like be the narrator for every single level at the beginning of it. I was like, awesome. I love that Patrick Stewart's here.
We will definitely talk about Patrick Stewart and his great contribution to this game. Overall, I just want to say, like, with regards to the development of this game, I have a lot of thoughts to share on this game. Overall, this is a game that works more than it doesn't work. And I think a big reason why this game works more than it doesn't is, unlike a lot of these other projects around this time, which were like Western studios taking Japanese IP and reimagining them, with this one, it really feels like the kind of like Japanese side of things and the European side of things kind of worked really kind of collaboratively to make a really great product. Years ago, when I used to write for that one video essay channel, Gamers, I remember I did a video essay on the Lost Planet series, and I remember there being this one quote from this one Capcom executive talking about why they hired Spark Unlimited to develop Lost Planet 3. Because it's this thing where it's like, hey, you want to make a fantastic like continuation of the Lost Planet franchise. You want to make a fantastic shooter. Why not hire a Bungie? Why not hire the best in the business? And basically this Capcom executive's answer was like, well, we kind of want a studio that we can push around if we need to. And so it's this thing where it's like, I feel like a lot of these projects were approached from the perspective of, we want to farm it out to the studio that we can bully if we need to kind of make the game into what we want it to be, but we're not going to really lend our help and expertise. And this really feels like a project that was a lot more collaborative, where Kojima and the people from Konami really like stepped up and were like, we're actually really going to guide you through this project and like really like elevate you as a studio. And so, yeah, that last thing I just said ended things on a little bit of a high note, but let's get dark. Let's get dark. I have a bit of an interesting history with this game. You see, in late 2010, I really wanted to play Mass Effect 2 when it released the following year. And so I agreed with my parents to get a PS3, jointly purchased between the two of us because they would be using it to watch DVDs and Blu-rays as well. The two games that I got with my PS3 when I first bought it were God of War 3 and Resistance 2. However, after connecting the console online, I saw Lords of Shadow's demo and decided, you know what? Seems interesting. Let's check it out. Hold on.
Well, that was back in the days of demos when like basically everything had a demo on PlayStation 3. That was nice. That was nice.
This is one of those demos where like you could only theoretically play up until a certain point in the game, but you wouldn't even necessarily be able to get that far in it because like there was like a timer basically.
Yeah.
And so you could only play as long as the timer allowed you to. Anyways, don't remember why I downloaded it. But I had fun with it. And walking away from it, I was like, man, excuse me. I had a lot of fun with this. This is basically the first game I ever played on this console. I should definitely get back to it at some point. I should definitely pick up the full game at some point. And that's definitely one of the reasons why I was motivated to put it on this BARF poll for this month. And so people vote on this game. I pop it into my console. I had picked up a like Lords of Shadow HD collection disc at some point, so I had it on hand. And first thing, right off the bat, annoyingly, on PS3, this game does not work with a PS4 controller, or for that matter, any other Bluetooth controller outside of the bog standard PS3 controller. And it's really annoying because, excuse me, I'm as I get progressively darker and more bitter, my health is deteriorating.
Yeah, that's like moonshine.
I wish I could have some. At this exact time, last year, we also did a Konami game that was on the PlayStation 3 360. That game being Metal Gear Solid 3, because this was before they re-released it on PS4, Xbox consoles. And that game also did not work with any other controller but the PS3 controller for me. And so it's weird that like 2 years in a row, first thing off the year, what am I playing? I'm playing a PlayStation 3 game that can only be played with a PlayStation 3 controller that weirdly is also from Konami. I don't know why that is, but anyways.
Well, it looks like Brian left his notes open here on the computer, and it says he played on something called Steam using a third-party USB controller, whatever that is. Oh,
Mad
Bluetooth,
cats.
excuse me.
I want to be clear. This is my own misfortune. I don't really hold this against the game. This is just me being stubborn, being like, I already have the game on PS3. I'll play it on PS3.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, so after that initial stumble, I start playing Lords of Shadow. And let me tell you, first couple levels, I'm kind of liking it. I'm like, okay, it's not as polished as your God of War, but I'm having a fun time with it. I like the level-based kind of structure of this game where the game is divided into chapters, and each of those chapters are divided into individual levels that only take a few minutes to complete. But as I get to the end of chapter 1, I'm starting to feel a little bit disappointed. The levels are getting individually a little bit longer and longer. The reveal of Patrick Stewart being the narrator and him being this actual person that is out to find Gabriel is really cool. Hold
He needs a cigarette.
Oh man.
I want a cigarette, maybe.
Anyways, that whole reveal involving Patrick Stewart's character is really cool. But the Shadow of the Colossus style boss fight that end caps Chapter 1, it's kind of a little bit janky. Didn't really love that one a whole lot. And so I'm coming out of Chapter 1. My opinion of the game's on a bit of a downswing. But I'm like, but hey, maybe the game gets better from here. Maybe it's just a little bit of a rough start. And as we become more acclimatized to this game's controls and feel, I'm going to have myself a better time.
I'm
I
just
start
glad we
Chapter
made it
1.
to Castlevania.
25 minutes in.
And so I start Chapter 2, and I see that it's 9 levels long, and I begin to panic. And so I start playing those levels, and I slowly but surely begin to lose my mind because of how mind-numbing each level is. And now Gabriel has to climb up a wall, and now he has to fight this wolf, and now he has to get on a spider, and now he has to open the door with a spider, and now he has to jump into a stump. It's all so boring, and it takes such a long time to get to the good stuff. And I'm really beginning to panic, because you see, while all of this is going on, I am working on my Cozyverse cooking stuff. I'm still finishing up all the stuff that I didn't get done really kind of like at the last minute when I debuted episode 1. I'm, looking at feedback, looking at things that didn't do well, editing that stuff. I'm also working on Pitch Perfect, which, by the way, you can go and watch right now on Respawn Aim Fire on Patreon. And that was, a lot of fun, but it took a lot of effort to put that together. And I'm like, fuck, I have so little time to actually contribute to playing this game, let alone video games in general this month. And am I even going to play this game? Is this the entire game? Is every level in this game 9 mind-numbing, incredibly fucking boring levels? And so I do something that I normally don't do, which is I go to howlongtobeat.com and I see that this game is 18 hours. For context, God of War 3, only 10 hours, and all the 3 other games that were in the poll for this month are like 10 hours or even less than that. And so I'm like, oh, fuck, did I fuck myself over here? And I'm really starting to despair, and I'm wondering, am I ever going to even get through this game? Am I going to Chad this? Am I going to give up and just watch the rest of it on YouTube?
Damn, that's a fucked up verb, Chad.
And eventually, what I decide to do is, you know what? Again, I don't like to spoil myself. I'm just going to search online. Castlevania Lords of Shadow boring. Castlevania Lords of Shadow too long. And what I quickly surmise from what I read online is people generally agree that the second chapter of the game, not the game as a whole, but the second chapter of the game is too long. And so I'm like, okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to change the difficulty down to easy. I'm just going to blast my way through chapter 2 and then set the difficulty back to normal. And I'm incredibly happy to report that that did the trick. There were still many issues that I had with the game that followed chapter 2. Many things that I am just so eager to rip into. But as a whole, Castlevania Lords of Shadow worked for me after we got through chapter 2.
Type in Castlevania boring now. The only search result's going to be your history lesson.
I still have about, according to this thing, 5 pages of notes. But if anybody wants to jump in and share their overall thoughts and experience with this game, please do so now, because my throat is
This man needs to take
dead.
a rest. I guess, Mickey B, you can start.
I've been holding that in for a whole month.
Yeah.
I've been holding that in. The seams were bursting. There were episodes of the podcast where I was like, oh, I want to just talk so badly about this. And I tried so hard to hold myself in.
Mickey B?
I just play this game for the titties.
There were titties in it.
I could look at some of them. Hobo Brian's notes here. He says he got all the way to the vampire level because all he had time for.
Not his first time playing it, I heard. He's played it before.
He didn't mention that, but probably he's a fucking nerd like this guy here. Let's see. He compared it to God of War, Prince of Persia, Shadow of the Colossus, Uncharted. He mentioned that it's very of its era, and it had a little Easter egg about something that said, "The cake is not a lie."
Yeah, there was that. I remember that. That wasn't very good. I like the I liked a lot of those notes that you can find on the knights throughout the game. I thought a lot of the lore was good. I didn't like that one note. It was a little bit too referential.
Now, Brian thought that Gabriel Belmont, the character's appearance, was interesting in that it was not interesting. Sounds like he just thought it was kind of a generic-looking character.
He does look like a dude, but I also would say this is what video games in 2010 looked like.
Yeah.
It's like either a bald white guy or like a dude with brown long hair, and that is fucking every video game protagonist in existence.
He says he liked the hand-drawn animations and for illustrating the moves. He said that was pretty.
Yeah, that was cool. I like his book, the whole book thing.
Yeah. He noted I personally never played an old Castlevania game because, like I said, I'm in it for the titties. Brian said the old whips were pretty namby-pamby. In this game, he says the whip is neither namby nor pamby.
That's what he wrote down, specific word for word, huh?
Word for word, I fucking swear.
What's funny about the whole titty
Hobo's
thing?
honor.
What's funny about the whole titty thing is there is that one Pachinko Castlevania game that came out a couple years ago that was like Castlevania erotic violence. You guys remember this one?
Nope.
I'll get my hands
No.
on that. I'm
Well, it was
every
a-
dumpster.
It was a Pachinko game called Castlevania Erotic Violence at a time where Konami was making a lot of Pachinko games. And I remember people being like, what? That's not what Castlevania is about. And it's like, this game's pretty erotic and pretty titty friendly, to be fair.
I
For some good
echoed
YouTube
my
things.
experience with it. I echoed a lot of Alex's things. In fact, that's what drove me to not finish the game. I think this was after
Ooh.
Pull the Chad.
my experience with it was I played up until the start of chapter 2. I also saw all of those little dots representing parts of chapter 2. And then I saw all the little dots representing how many chapters there were. And I said, I can't. I cannot do that right now. And so I went to YouTube and I found a 10-hour playthrough and started watching it on 2x speed. And I got about 2/3 of the way through that. And then I went and found a 12-minute story recap and watched that instead of the last third of the recap of the 2x speed video. But from what I watched, this was actually a really interesting game that did really cool things, that had the worst first 2 hours of a game I think I've ever played. It is worse not being in like it was a bad game, but it's just like it does the rest of the game such an injustice because you start as a character you know nothing about and do not care about, playing with generic ass weapons that just they don't feel unique. They don't feel like you have to do them, like use them strategically in any way. And then you are all you know about the story and why you care is that it's exactly Shadow of the Colossus's story. You're this unknown protagonist who's trying to bring someone he loves back to life by killing giant colossi. That's all that I got until I started watching the rest of the playthrough. That being paired with, it was just God of War 3 gameplay, or God of War gameplay paired with Shadow of the Colossus gameplay, neither of which were as good as either of those games. And so I just said, you know what? I don't have time for this. I got to go watch something else. But watching the rest of the game was like, oh shit, this actually did end up going some really cool places with some really unique ideas. And it seems like combat did also improve and get substantial. And the last thing I think that was a huge turnoff for me was the UI. Every single time anything on the screen needs to happen, you get 3 full sentences about what's going on in the top of your screen. Whether it's I played it on Xbox. I guess this is how Xbox, like, you get close enough to a point to grapple to. Press this button to grapple to this point, and then swing your. And I was like, cool, got that. And then the next time I go to grapple, that full sentence shows up again. Or every time that I get it stuck in a fucking swamp puddle, it's like, you're in the swamp puddle. Get out before you drown, or whatever the fuck it was. And it was just like, I don't need, like, show me the button, maybe. And after I do it 2 or 3 times, maybe let me figure it out on my own. Don't give me the full sentences. I don't need the full sentences.
I'm okay with it because I usually only play after a full bottle of one of these, and I forget all these moves. There's a lot of moves in this game, and I forget how to do them.
Chad, I just want to say real quick, I'm so glad that you brought that up because I felt the exact same way, where there are so many moments where it literally feels like the game throws a paragraph at you. Like it'll be like, hey, it seems like you don't have the specific item that you need to traverse this particular ledge. Maybe you should go back and get that item. And then you can come back and you can potentially cross over this ledge, smiley face. It is weird how like oddly personable a lot of those dialogue pop-ups are in the game in a way that's kind of immersion breaking.
Yeah.
It's not like the one thing that I hated the most about the game, but it was just kind of a weird choice there.
Oh, fuck. I just heard the old turlet flush. I gotta go peace, y'all.
Oh,
Bye,
man.
Mickey B. We've enjoyed you very much. So I do fucking love Mickey B. Jesus Christ. So I'll echo a little bit of it where it is weird paced for like the first chapter to be what it is, cool, and with the Colossus. The second chapter being 9 levels, when literally the rest of the game is 2 or 3 levels per chapter. It makes no sense the way that it's paced. But like for me, I was playing like whatever, this is fine, I don't really care. And I think about chapter 3 or 4, when everything starts being like 2 or 3 levels apiece. I was like, oh fuck it, I really like this game. Because you start getting a lot of new powers, you're getting crazy upgrades, you're constantly getting new abilities. You know, they did the whole Metroidvania stuff, but I just like, no, every time you do a level, here's a new thing. And the last 2/3 of that game, maybe the last 3/4 of that game, I really dug. I really, really liked this game by the time it finished up. Hey, Brian, are you okay?
Hey!
Brian, you
Sorry
might want to
about
watch
that,
that
guys.
chair you're sitting in.
Why is that? Oh, man.
Yeah, there was a guy that loved Castlevania pachinko erotic violence that was sitting in that chair, if you can believe it.
The fuck?
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
also here for
Said
the
you guys
titties,
grew up
and he
together.
watches porn sometimes on your computer.
Is Mickey B in here again?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
Yeah.
piece of shit.
I liked him. He was a cool guy.
No, I met him under the bridge, and that guy will just—he is the moochingest moocher. I swear.
He read your notes about Castlevania, so we know how.
Did he fucking drink my last Mountain Dew?
Well, yeah, well, he made Mountain Dew with Moonton. Well, I forget what he called it. Moonton Dew. Moonshine
Of course
Dew.
he did. Of course he did. Sorry, dudes. I ate jalapeno chips with my buddy yesterday playing this game, and it wrecked me.
Oof. Got to clean that.
Where are we at? What have we gotten so far?
Well, we finally got to the game
Yeah.
after 25 minutes, so you haven't missed that much.
Oh, good.
No. Like I said,
Oh, I see. He scrolled down my page a little bit. I can see where he was in my notes here.
there you go. Yeah, again, agree, it's slow, but the last 3/4 of that game, I really, really dug. Especially when it's like, when it's 2 parts. It's like, all right, here you do like a platform, you're like, go up this tower or whatever, and then it's like, here's a boss fight. And like, that's just what like 3 chapters in a row are, and I'm like, fucking dig it. I'm into it. I would say, out of all the BARF games we played last year, like this would probably, playing the whole thing, again, the beginning is rough. I'll give you that. Like, the beginning is not great. But out of everything we played last year, like this would be in that final 4 of that tournament bracket we had last year, determining our best BARF games by the time I finished the game. I definitely agree. So yeah, I really dug this game. I'm glad that Alex got past it, because he was been, bubbling up for so long, and it's like, this guy has bad opinions. He doesn't know anything about video games, obviously. He's a plebe.
So I can see that he must have already mentioned that this game feels like it took a lot of shit from popular games of the time. But what did you guys all think about the neutral magic, and you can assign it to light power or dark or shadow power as a mechanic? Is that something that's ever been done before? Because I only knew it from this game.
I don't know if I've noticed it from anywhere else. I like that system, especially near the
was
end.
cool.
Having to use the light and dark magic in specific situations as boss fights. I'm like, oh, this is cool and this is interesting. Especially for that last boss fight.
And then a lot, of course, along with light magic or shadow magic, you've got different monsters that have different vulnerabilities to each, and then you've got different powers you can purchase for each. I just thought it was a really cool way to juggle kind of, and it's like, it kind of tailors your character to what you want it to be a little bit, even though you probably just stash them in both and buy moves from both. And
It was a really cool system, and I definitely had a lot of fun learning some of the more advanced mechanics and button kind of input combinations you can learn from the book. Like, for example, that one thing where when you have the demon magic, the shadow magic equipped, you can like create basically like a flamethrower that does a lot of damage to enemies that are directly in front of you. That was fun. I will say there are a lot of mechanics in the game, though, that are tied to using the light and shadow magic in ways that the game does not communicate to you at all. Like there's that one sequence where you have to take a throwing knife and then you have to activate shadow magic and then throw it at like a dartboard or a something or other on a wall down a hallway. Spent like 30 minutes being like, what the hell am I supposed to do here?
Yeah, there's a couple random puzzle ones. They weren't too bad, but there was a couple, like that music box. Wasn't hard, but you just had to do it perfectly, which was like, fuck this stupid music box. Outside of that, and then there was the Dracula, not Dracula, excuse me, what's his name? Fucking Frankenstein, like lightning rod puzzle where you have to constantly rotate it. That was a little
really
rough.
tough.
But
Yeah.
outside of a couple annoying puzzles, I liked the variety and all
Good
that
variety.
stuff into it.
Yeah. There was another cool little mechanic was riding on the monsters. You know, you beat them up a little bit and they get stunned and you jump on and start riding them around. Each monster has different powers they can do. Wish they did a little more with it. It was always like you make a bridge, you smash open a door, and then you got to get off. I wish you could kind of ride them around longer, do more things. One thing I will say though, it is, generally favorable. Enjoyed the game. Think it's pretty enjoyable even today, given the time that it was made. But one thing I will say is fuck the mazes with the fixed camera angles.
Yeah, we've got
especially
some
after 4 beers.
Yeah, that's a rough one. I'll give it to you.
I remember there was one specific scene with the fixed camera angles. So it's according to your viewpoint, your character is running and you jump from left to right. But the way the camera suddenly changes and everything, there's a moment where you're going right to left and then it flips back and I'm like, this is like a cinema sin.
It's definitely, some of those fixed camera angles are cool where it's like, you're walking in a bridge and it like sticks and then you see the cool thing in the background. It's like, oh, look, they're giving me a big cinematic moment. But there are definitely ones where it's like, all right, I turned down this hallway and now, even though I'm pressing forward, my character's moving left.
Right.
But if I let go, it is weird. But there's some cinematic moments. There's some it's like, this is stupid. I don't like that.
That was a popular type of game at the time, but the way they handled it, especially with the maze levels, I think there's 3 maze levels I got through with my buddy, and your orientation is so fucked when you're trying to navigate these mazes because the camera's glitching all over the place.
Yeah, I will say I like the option. Basically, every time there's a weird puzzle, there's like a dead body there, and it's like a guy like giving you a clue, and it's like you can press a button. It's like you won't get the 1,000-point reward, but we'll just give you the solution to the puzzle. I'm like, I don't give a fuck about these points. Let me just know what it is. Oh, that's what it is? Easy. Done. We're out of here. That's why I beat this game. That's why Cozy went on how long to beat. I beat this game in like 14 hours. I didn't have any problem. Again, I was also just like, give me the puzzles. I don't give a fuck. So it wasn't too bad. But yeah, cool.
I've been pretty I've been pretty tough on this game since the start of this podcast. I do want to shout out a couple of things I did really like about this game. Number one, for a PS3 360 era game, this game is shockingly pretty beautiful. I feel like there's this trend where in our minds we imagine PS3 360 era games looking that much better than they actually tend to be when we go back to them. And I feel like this one kind of split the difference where I wouldn't confuse it for a PS4 game, but it definitely looked a lot better than a lot of other examples of like games from that era that I've gone back to. The boss fight at the end of Chapter 2 with the giant stone titan, the boss fight itself, not my favorite in the game, but that boss fight was like incredibly beautiful. Like it felt like concept art. Yeah.
I would say short of a game that's got like hyper stylized, like Wind Waker or something, Xbox 360 is probably the earliest era I would want to play a 3D game in, especially if they're highly detailed like this or like BioShock or something. It masks it pretty well. Pretty good
I do also want to call out. I appreciated a lot of the like very kind of like subtle nods to a lot of the kind of earlier Castlevania games. I like, for example, the way that Gabriel Belmont walks is like directly like almost 1-to-1 to the walk animation cycle of the Belmonts in like the early 2D Castlevania games. I thought that was like a nice throwback, and I briefly alluded to it earlier, but I liked a lot of the lore entries for a lot of the characters and monsters in the game. It really felt like you could tell that the people making this game were like fans of the old school Castlevania games and understood that the series is kind of this weird beast where it's this amalgamation of all these classic Hollywood monsters like Dracula and Frankenstein and the Mummy that don't totally make sense together. And so I feel like they really tried hard to try and kind of weave a cohesive narrative that would explain why all these monsters exist within the same universe. And I like that a lot. I always look forward to reading about monsters after I encountered them and fought them. And Zobek, the character that Patrick Stewart plays, great. No notes on him.
Always
Great
loved
character.
Patrick Stewart as a voice actor, but I do have a quick question about Gabriel. Did my buddy and I imagine this, or did his Scottish accent not appear until halfway through the game? Because I swear he didn't have one in the beginning.
So he does, but he just says like such short sentences you don't hear it until he starts speaking full sentences, and you're like, oh, he's clearly Scottish. But early on, he's just like, yes, and it's like, well, I can't really tell what's going on there. But no, you only hear it like 3 or 4 times because he only says like 2 sentences 3 or 4 times in the game. So
Yeah, I wanted to a picture that he got called back to the studio for another session, months later, and he's like, "What did I sound like?" Just do it, man. Just go for it.
just go, just try it again. We'll be all right.
How did you guys feel about the amount of QuickTime events in the game? Because that was definitely, again, not my least favorite thing about the game, but definitely something that irked me a little bit, is because I found that they were very frequent and honestly kind of tough as somebody coming from, having played a lot of the older school God of War games that also feature a lot of QuickTime events.
I'm glad we left that error behind. It didn't bother me, but I'm like, yes, I remember this. I don't love this, but like everyone did it, so whatever, I guess.
They were in abundance, but I did appreciate that you can just kind of hit any button you want as long as you time it correctly. I hate the ones where it's like, there's occasions where you're trying to break free of somebody. Sometimes that's a random button assignment, but most of them, you can just hit any button you want.
I have a couple more segments that I want to do to close out this podcast. First,
Can I mention one thing
Yes.
first? We're coming up on the end of my notes here. In fact, this is my last note. Regarding the moves, there were redundancies that kind of frustrated me, and this may be a nitpick, but you have a dash, a charge punch, where you charge up your punch and then basically do a falcon punch, and then a shoulder smash. And oftentimes they all kind of do the same thing, and it wasn't clear to me which one to use. And then there's also this moment where you ride on a warthog and you can smash down doors and stuff early in the game before you get the shoulder smash. So I kept getting confused because when you're on the warthog and you got to smash open a door, you got to get a running start at it, which feels like a dash move. When you're a solo and then you learn the charge shoulder, you got to stand in place. And then the way you do the move is such that you're not even getting a running start. You're just shouldering this door open. And I kept having to re-look it up and be like, wait, what do I do? Do I run first? And it was like so weirdly similar how some things require a shoulder smash, some things require a charge punch. I didn't love that. I thought they could have cleaned that up a little bit.
That's why that paragraph is there every once in a while.
well, that's what's weird about it, right? Is that the game has these moments where it brings up these incredibly long, verbose paragraphs of, oh, this is what you should do, shouldn't do. But then it has moments where you think that the game would overly communicate what you're supposed to do, but it says nothing. And that led to a lot of moments of frustration.
The one that got me was there's a dodge button, right? I think maybe on the Xbox it was B, maybe.
Well,
so
it's your block button is the same as your roll. You just have to press direction.
Right, yeah. So it was a direction and whatever your block was, right? And then you're fighting that first Colossus at the end of chapter 1, and you get up onto the hand, and it says in giant letters, dodge! But then it tells you, use the thumbstick and press a different button to do that. And I was like, wait, that's not the dodge button, though. And then he swipes me away.
Yeah.
And I was
I know
like, why did you
exactly
tell me
what
to push
you're
A?
talking about.
Dodge is B. And then, nope.
100%.
All right.
It's when you're up on the ice monster's arm and
on
it's
his arm,
like
yeah.
dash A or whatever, and you're like, that's not how you dodge.
Yeah. Stupid.
Weird.
I want to take a quick moment to talk about the ending and the post-credit scene.
Oh boy, that's where the game gets real good. Let me tell you, holy shit, I was hyped as fuck. But let's go ahead, Alex.
I want to say this right up front. Did not love the ending prior to the post-credit scene. I thought it was a bit of a cop-out that you spend this entire game, reading Zobek's notes on you, knowing that something is up. The reveal happens, hey, he's betrayed you, he's actually this evil thing, and then there's a bait and switch of, oh no, he was actually the middle manager, and Satan himself is actually the guy that's been pulling all the strings. When that
Naked
happened,
Satan,
I was like...
played by
I think-
Jason Isaacs. It's fucking wonderful.
Yeah, Lucius Malfoy, I think. I have notes on this later, I'll get back to it. Yeah, that was a little disappointing, but then we get to the post-credit scene. And the post-credit scene for this game was, I wrote this down, it's everything that we love about Kojima post-credit scenes polished to a fine sheen, in that it was a series of escalating reveals that were each better than the last. First, you have the reveal that Zobek is alive, and that's like, okay, cool. His character was great. I'm glad he's not dead. Then it's a reveal that Gabriel is now Dracula and is immortal. That's really cool. I mean, we've been missing Dracula this whole game. It's great that he finally showed up. And then it's revealed, not only is he Dracula, but he is old and decrepit and mangly. Oh, that's a cool take on this character. I feel like we don't really get this kind of take on Dracula all that much. It's a lot like when Kojima tweeted recently about finding Oscar Isaac really pathetic. You know, there's just something beautiful in patheticness sometimes. And then it's revealed that the church that they're in is a rundown church in the modern day. And the reveal happens because Dracula gets kicked through the front window of the church and falls onto the pavement on, I don't know, Castlevania Times Square, wherever they are. And then the final reveal that Dracula and Zobek are going to have to team up to defeat Satan once and for all. Like, it sucks that apparently Lords of Shadow 2 was not very good, because this is such a good setup for a sequel and like a perfect post-credit scene. I thoroughly enjoyed this.
Oh, it's that post-credits. I'm like, okay, as much shit as I give Kojima, you know, again, he didn't make this game, but I understand, like you said, it's like a polished Kojima twist, like where it's actually good and coherent. But I was like, fucking, like, okay, because I knew that Gabriel ended up being Dracula. So I'm like, that's cool that we get this. And not knowing that would be even fucking crazy. You'd be like, holy shit, this dude's talking. And then that it's modern day is like even fucking more insane like that. So I'm like, cool way to do that. It's awesome that, like, it's basically a reboot of Castlevania, because, you know, Dracula was already around when the Belmonts started doing shit. So this being a different take on that, where the Belmont is the Lord of Darkness, Lord of Shadow, some may say, is a really, really cool thing. And then the fact that we're not fighting death, which I do like the little like fake out of like, oh, this guy's a necromancer, he looks like death, because we always fight death at the end of Castlevania. And then you just fight a dragon, and then Satan actually beats your ass. Even better. And then that you're fucking Dracula in modern day has to team up with Patrick Stewart to kill Satan. Like, that is the coolest fucking premise I've ever heard in my life. Like, holy shit.
Is that how they pitched the game?
That's how I read it.
Before we barrel to my final segment of the podcast, real quick, did anyone here play either of the game's 2 DLC episodes?
No.
No, I read what they were, though. Because apparently a lot of people were like, there's holes in this story. And apparently the DLC tries to close those holes that people had.
Yeah, so first one is called Reverie, and it's where he goes back to that castle and does something with the vampire girl to like free her, but she dies. And the second one, he fights a new Lord of Shadow called the Forgotten One. I guess he wins. Apparently, I read this during my research. Dave Cox did an interview with Edge Online for the leading up to the release of Lords of Shadow 2, and he himself said that he thought that the 2 DLC episodes were a mistake. Like, he was like, nah, I don't think we should have done those. So I guess it works out that we didn't play them. Yeah. Speaking of not having played them, did anybody here play Lords of Shadow Mirror of Fate or Lords of Shadow 2?
I own them. I have never played them, but I have them on my Xbox. So maybe now I will. I don't know.
I don't know. It's tough because, like, again, that post-credit scene is great. I think there are a lot of great things to the original Lords of Shadow, things where I'm like, if this was polished just a little bit more, I think I would really enjoy it. And so part of me wants to check out Lords of Shadow 2 just to see, did they at least improve upon it in some of these ways? But knowing how kind of caustic the reaction was to that game, I feel just kind of like I might never get to it.
Yeah, apparently Mirror of Fate is like, it goes back to 2D, and it's Alucard's in it, so it's like a middle point between the two games. So maybe that'd be interesting. His Alucard / Trevor Belmont, because he's a Belmont. You remember that?
Alucard is Dracula
Alucard's
backwards.
It is, but he's also Trevor Belmont because he's a Belmont. So Alucard is 2 people. It's really cool. So the thing that happens in the DLC
it's
is
like
that
at the end of Symphony of the Night when the castle flips upside down and becomes the same world, but it's a second world. And Alucard is like, oh yeah, it's Dracula backwards. I'm 2 people.
It's backwards. It's backwards.
I just want to point out that I played Symphony of the Night for the first time in the last decade sometime, and I managed to play through it without spoilers, and it fucking blew my mind when that castle
Same.
flipped.
You're like,
Yeah.
holy
Wow.
shit, gotta go through this again. Awesome. Yeah. Anyways, what was going on, Cozy?
Yeah. So, be careful with that. Be careful with that light. You'll kill a vampire with that thing. Nope.
I love that in the castle, by the way. Quick note, I just loved when I realized I could tear down those curtains and let in the sunlight, and they were a lot like,
Like, oh, we hate the sun.
that was good shit.
What I liked about that level too is eventually the light goes away because
Oh,
you
yeah.
realize, time is passing, night is falling, and so
was
that's
scary.
no longer a weapon I can rely on.
That's when my buddy and I finally started to pass out, and I was like, I gotta call it a night. I did beat this game in 2017 or something, but my memory's pretty hazy, so that's about as much as I remember is up to that point. I
Chad,
have the
Phil.
DLC though, so I'm looking forward to going through it.
Yeah, that explains how
Ooh.
he becomes a vampire. The whole point of the DLC is just like, how did this dude become a vampire between the end of the game where he's like, oh, my wife, all the souls went to heaven, but I can't be with her. And then at the end, he's just a fucking 3,000 years in the future, he's a fucking vampire. It explains what turns him into a vampire.
Oh yeah, because the light didn't burn me.
What?
When I
What?
tore open the windows, the
Man,
light
he couldn't have been a
didn't burn my
Dracula the whole
character.
time.
No,
'cause he
he's-
was outside
right.
of
He
the
is
city.
not a vampire. Yeah. It's
Okay.
after he fights Satan, he becomes a vampire. That's a sentence I just said.
Chad, I need you to give me a theme song for the latest and greatest segment on this podcast, Voice Actor Trivia.
Voice actor to the danger zone.
Perfect. This is Voice Actor Trivia, where we shed a little bit of light and trivia on some of the voice actors in these games. Gabriel Belmont, of course, was portrayed by Robert Carlyle. Robert Carlyle, an actor known for appearing in a lot of Danny Boyle's movies, like Trainspotting, T2 Trainspotting, The Beach, and Yesterday, as well as 28 Weeks Later, which technically Danny Boyle did not direct that one, but obviously he was still involved in that one. Fun fact, he was also, I just learned this during my research, Durza, the Shade in the live-action Aragon movie. Remember that one?
I do remember the movie. I don't know who the fuck that character is.
He's like the evil dude that is pursuing Aragon, and Aragon kills him at the very end.
Oh, he's the bad
That
guy.
movie, I remember Durza being decent. I remember the actor that they used to portray Galbatorix, who's like the evil king dude, being terrible. I don't know who played him. He also played the version of Durza in the tie-in video game for Aragon as well. Of course, Zobek was played by Sir Patrick Stewart. We all know this guy. Obviously, he's played Jean-Luc Picard on Star Trek and Professor X in the X-Men movies for many years now. In terms of video games, of course, he's done a lot of X-Men and Star Trek video games as well. Outside of that, he usually tends to do a lot of narration work in games. He was the narrator in Lego Universe, for example, in a game called Felix the Reaper. Doesn't really have a lot of these like roles like Zobek in Lords of Shadow, where he's just like playing a character. Marie, Gabriel's ill-fated wife, was of course played by Natasha McElhone. I again don't know if that's how her name is pronounced. I apologize if it's wrong. A British actress who has appeared in roles on TV shows like Californication, and also movies like Ronin, the 2002 Solaris, and The Truman Show. She hasn't appeared in a lot of other video games, but she has appeared in a prominent TV show based on a popular video game series. So I want to take a guess which TV show and which character.
Castlevania.
No, it's
That was a
That
good
was
guess,
that was
though.
a
It was
really
a
good
good
guess. Yeah.
not a bad guess. It's not a bad guess, but I should specify that it is a live action TV show.
Knuckles. I have no idea.
I'll give you a hint. This is actually a show. I don't know if you're watching the latest season of this show,
Hella?
but this is a show that you would probably
Hella?
be. How do you
Hello,
spell that?
H-A-L-A.
That it is indeed Halo.
Oh,
I've
Halo.
never heard anyone pronounce it that way. She plays Dr.
Yeah,
Catherine
she does play
Halsey
the
on
Dr.
the Halo
Halsey,
TV
yeah.
show.
Her name is Natasha McElhone.
Macalone.
Griffin
But that
McElroy.
actually makes sense. Makes sense. Cornell, who is the
That's where Andy
werewolf
goes to
Lord of
school.
Shadow, the first one that
In
you
the
fight,
office.
is played by British actor Richard Ridings.
Dick
It's a guy
Ridings.
who's Got him. Also Dick Ridings as well. Appeared in a lot of movies, such as The Pianist, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and
The Penis.
Rise of the Planet of the Apes. On TV, he's best
Rise
known for
of the
portraying
Planet
the
of the
character of Daddy Pig in Peppa
Oh,
Pig.
he's Peppa Pig. Fucking hell. That's wild.
You know what? I didn't know the little Peppa Pig girl, actual Peppa Pig, the
Is
pig,
an actual pig.
was the little girl in Blind Manor.
Oh, interesting.
In terms of video games, he's actually appeared in like quite a few. Like for example, he appears in the original Xenoblade Chronicles as a character called Mikol. But he is probably best known for appearing in a bunch of Ninja Theory games. For example, he voiced a character called Hunter in DMC. He voiced a character called Roach in Heavenly Sword, and he voiced a character called Pigsy in Enslaved Odyssey to the West. And I want to actually give a shout out to that character. So not only is that character like a pretty fun character in that game, but there is also an entire DLC episode that is entirely centered around Pigsy. And I found him like did a surprisingly good job of like competently carrying that entire episode on his back.
This is not a racial
plays a lot of
thing.
pigs.
I'm looking at pictures of Pigsy, and I do not enjoy looking at Pigsy.
He's a real pigsty of a
I
character.
have
That's
nothing
sort of his
against
whole
cyborgs,
thingy.
but do not like looking at Pigsy.
And finally, last but not least, we alluded to him earlier. Satan was portrayed by Jason Isaacs, the actor best known for portraying Lucius Malfoy in Harry Potter, along with a number of other roles across movies and TV. In terms of video games, he's actually voiced some like pretty high-profile characters as of late. He was Agaphisto and Mephisto in Marvel's Midnight Suns.
Yeah, he's the devil in Marvel. Yeah, absolutely.
He was Lord Enver Gortash in Baldur's Gate 3. Adam can probably tell us all about that character.
He's very cool. One of the main bad guys.
He was also, I'm going to give you guys another opportunity to do a little bit of guesswork, a villain in a prominent AAA game that released within the past 2 months.
You said he's a villain?
Yes, a
Persona
villain.
3
And a prominent
Reload.
triple A.
But not
No.
not a quadruple A game.
No, so it's not Skull and Bones.
Okay, so rules that out.
Not Skull and Bones. Not Skull and Bones, not Persona 3.
Come jump. 4.
I'll give you another hint in that it is a prominent AAA game, but it's not necessarily a successful AAA game.
Is he in Suicide Squad?
He is in Suicide Squad. Do you know who he plays?
No.
Brainiac?
Lex Luthor, maybe?
He is Brainiac.
Oh, he's Brainiac. Ah, good for you. This man getting work.
Yeah, and that's it for voice actor trivia. Play us out, Chad. And yeah, that's it for the podcast. Just final thoughts. I just want to say real quick, this game was just one hell of a struggle to get through. But I do understand why so many people to this day say, man, I would love to get like a remaster of this game, because there's a lot of really cool stuff in this game, and I just feel like it's buried under perhaps a layer of dust that is, just some of the poorly aged design philosophy and occasional bullshit of this era. But there's something really cool underneath this, and I think perhaps a remaster, if we were to ever get something like that from the Lords of Shadow that are Castlevania nowadays, might be kind of cool.
Oh, I will say one last thing. That there's a cool... So if you've watched the Castlevania on Netflix, the whole point of that is at the beginning of that story, they want to humanize Dracula a little bit, just to make him like his arc actually interesting, and he's not just like a bad guy laughing in the background. And apparently I was, reading over trivia and stuff for this game. They're like, got some influence from this game where they're like, oh yeah, you're Dracula in this video game. So he has to be like an interesting, he can't just be a villain that you hate. You get to person you like. So that's part of that characterization in the Castlevania for Netflix came from the idea of this game. So I think that's really cool, because Dracula's really fucking cool in the Netflix series. So I like that they took that path with him.
Cool. Chad, Brian, anything else you want to
Did he name himself Dracula after the Dracula species? Or did Dracula's like retroactively be called Dracula's because he named himself Dracula.
You want me to tell you the
Yeah.
real answer? At the end of the game, he says, "En et sun Dracul," which is Romania for "I am the dragon / the devil." So Dracul is just a Romanian word for "I am an evil thing," and that's what he just named himself. "I am an evil thing," which is Dracula.
And then everyone said all vampires are now called Draculas because one big Dracula called himself Dracula. Okay.
That's how it works. When you call yourself something, everyone has to agree to it.
Right.
So what the fuck was the origin of the name Gandalfi? What was that shit?
Yeah, I don't know what that was. Knock off fucking
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings guy over there.
Right. And with that, we've arrived at the end of tonight's BARF review. As was said at the
real
top of
quick.
the show.
I'm so sorry. I do have a review written in by a listener.
Oh, shit.
This is
I apologize. I did
I
not
forgot about it
make
till
a
right
point
now.
of writing it into
You
my
know
notes
how
as
easy
well.
it is
We, of
to
course,
forget.
so easy to forget. Of course, you can write into our BARF reviews your opinions of your own. We will do our best in the future not to forget that at the very last moment. Thank you, Adam, for reminding me of that. Adam, take it away with your review from one of our beloved listeners.
All right, this is from Mass Keaton. You might have noticed Mass Keaton in the chat before. Mass Keaton says, "I have many thoughts on Lords of Shadow, but I'm sure you'll cover the majority of them. The main thought is that the mechanic of getting power-ups from the corpses that those sent before you is really cool. Showed the seriousness and danger of the quest by seeing all who failed before you. And then you meet Pan. Pan makes it clear that the only way past him is to kill him. You know, like the only way to like finish your journey is to kill him. You find him and kill him. It's a noble moment and a good one. And I was curious how you'd find power-ups now, since no previous members of your order could have made it past Pan. From that point on, you're still getting power-ups by finding the dead bodies of the member of your orders. If killing Pan was the only way past that barrier and Pan was alive for you to kill him, how did other members of your order get there?" That's true. That's interesting.
I love when you're fighting the boss. It's like the first lord or the second lord or something. It's just a dude with the big old spiky hammer and he's in the round arena and shit. And he's like, "Is this?" He keeps taunting you. He's like, "Is this the best the Brotherhood has to send me?" And I'm like, "Motherfucker, there's dead Brotherhood all over the place. Like, they all suck. Why you got your hopes up for these guys?"
Yeah. Like as Mass Keaton said, there's a little bit, I mean, it's just a video game. That's a plot, but there are like a lot of those guys are everywhere. Like we get those cool notes and the interesting backs. We're like, a lot of the Brotherhood got killed doing this journey, man. A lot of them. It's very cool.
And with that, we've arrived at the end of tonight's BARF review. As we said at the top of the show, remember that you can catch regular episodes of the Respawning Fire podcast live on twitch.tv/Affable Idiots every Sunday evening at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as well as on YouTube and podcast services every Tuesday at 9 a.m. EST. And of course, you can also look forward to this episode also going up on YouTube and podcast services soon as well. But that's not all. Now that February's BARF game is out of the way, we're ready to delve together into our next BARF experience for the month of March. Because we're heading down to PAX East later this month and are knee-deep exploring the deepest depths of Gaia in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, we asked you, our viewers, to go to patreon.com/respawningfire to vote between 4 short AAA games for us to play in the month of March. Those games were Uncharted: Lost Legacy, Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, and the Stanley Parable, which I don't think really counts as a AAA game, but regardless, you voted for us to play Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. The game is available to play basically on every major home console and PC currently on the market, so be sure to give it a shot and share your thoughts with us on it ahead of our eventual review at the end of March. And of course, if you feel especially strong about it and or have a homeless person that occasionally breaks into your house and wants to join us on our review of it, hit us up and we'll be more than happy to slot you up on the show as a guest host. Speaking of guest hosts, Brian, thank you so much for being such a wonderful guest host this evening, even though you were absent for half of it. If people wanted to find you online, where could they do so? And is there anything that you're up to that you would want to plug?
First of all, I'm so sorry. It's super embarrassing, and I apologize for anything Mickey B may have said that was rude or unkind or thoughtless or heartless. He does not have a lot of social skills. You can find anything and all things that I do at timetodierpg.com. We have an actual play TTRPG podcast, but it's edited in a way that it sounds like an audio drama. So you still hear us rolling dice, you still hear us improvising and making dumb decisions, but there's sound effects, there's music, it's immersive, it sounds like you're really there.
Time to Die RPG.com.
Hell yeah. Adam, anything you're up to that you would want to plug?
No. Catch me on Respawn Aim Fire, baby. Catch me
Chat,
in secret
anything
Discords.
outside of Respawning Fire and secret Discords that we should know about?
TTRPG stands for Titty Titty RPG.
Oh, man. Oh, before we close up the episode, I do want to issue a quick correction. Earlier, I said that one Castlevania Pachinko game was called Castlevania Erotic Violence. It's actually called CR Pachinko Akumajo Dracula, which is basically just how you say Castlevania in Japanese. The reason why it's called the Erotic Violence Pachinko Castlevania game is because in the trailer, there are like a bunch of like moments where English text is highlighted on screen, and one of the phrases is erotic violence, and so people call it the Erotic Violence Castlevania game, but it's not actually called that. And yeah, on that note, thank you once again for tuning in to Respawn Aim Fire, and we will see you next time.